Yeah, good morning, guys. Welcome back to my garage. I was out here cleaning my guns, and it's early in the morning. I tend to get up early and get a lot of things done out here in the garage, and having a nice warm cup of coffee, and it's just a pleasant time to be out here working on some guns. And I thought, while I was cleaning these guns, I thought, I'm gonna talk about a couple things with these particular guns. These are my tactical levers, and both of these have muzzle brakes attached. I have threaded barrels on these, and so I have attached the muzzle brakes. And a lot of people probably wonder, well, what's the advantage of that, and why go through the trouble, and what's that all about, right? So I thought I'd talk about that. And just before I do, first of all, I want to thank all the people that subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate the support. If there's anything I can do better, just let me know. I'm not a sales guy. I'm just a guy in the garage who likes to do things just like everybody else does, right? And one of those things is I like my levers, and I haven't always been into the levers. I spent, and I think I mentioned this before, I spent 8 years in the Marine Corps. I was in the 5th Marines, and my first 4 years I was a machine gunner, and I had a secondary MOS of scout sniper. So I was part of the state platoon, the surveillance and target acquisition platoon. So I carried the M40 sniper rifle, very familiar with that gun. Again, this was a long time ago, lots changed, I know that. I had issued the M60 machine gun. I was an expert on the 50 caliber heavy machine gun, the squad automatic weapon, and one of the guns that all Marines carry, at the time anyway, was the M16. And when I went in, I was issued, originally this was when the M16A1 was being phased out and the M16A2 was coming in. Yeah, I know, that's how old I am. But there was a big differences between the A1 and the A2. And one of the differences was on the end of that barrel, they had what was called a flash suppressor on the A1. And on the A2, it was now called a compensator, right? It still had flash suppression, capabilities, but essentially the flash suppressor, all it was a device on the end that had some openings on it, ports, and when a round goes off, there's a force, an explosive force that pushes that projectile at the barrel. And when it comes out the end, you can get some of that explosion out there, that explosive force or flash. And the flash suppressor, all it did was just kind of dampen some of that out as it went through those ports. It just broke it up, right? And on the A2, when they put this compensator on there, they just filled in the bottom ports. And what that was intended to do was smooth out your shots, right? The smoother you can make those shots, the less barrel rise and the less recoil, the smoother that shot is, the more accurate your shots are going to be, right? That's just logical, common sense, right? And it was pretty effective. I noticed a difference. It was a really smooth shooting rifle. I think the M16A2 and the whole M16 line was very underrated. I mean, that rifle was incredible, the capabilities it had. But anyway, back to what I want to talk about today is muzzle devices, specifically muzzle brakes and compensators. And I use those terms hand in hand. I'll use compensator, I'll use brake. I use them together, and I'll explain all that in a minute. I'm going to talk about why, I use these, why I have them on these guns, and my experience with them. And I'm going to break up some of the terminology. I want to break down some of this weird terminology. Maybe it's just in the civilian world. I never ever heard this terminology in the military while I was in, the way it's applied in the civilian world with brakes. And I'll talk about that as I go over these brakes. So sit back, enjoy the video, have a cup of coffee, and let's talk about muzzle brakes and muzzle devices. Let's get into it. All right, guys, so we're talking about muzzle brakes or compensators, and hopefully you'll find this really interesting. But the first thing we need to talk about is how these things work, right? And it's a pretty simple concept. Here we have our 45-70 round. Now this is happens to be an Underwood ammo. round. Very cool round, by the way. It's 4570. And really what happens here, and this is probably pretty basic information for a lot of you guys, but just to totally understand how these things work and how to get the most out of them, I want to run through this. So you got your round in the chamber, firing pin strikes the primer, and it basically creates an explosion. All right, now where does all that energy go? All right, so all that energy is pushing this projectile down your barrel. When all that energy gets to this point and exits the end of the barrel, this is where your brake or compensator starts doing its magic. All right, so let's have a quick look at this. See, get the flashlight here. So sorry about the flickering here. It's just the way the light works, right? You can see inside of there, there's some basically fins that are pointing in to the direction of the barrel where that energy is coming out. It catches that energy and redirects it, and it's redirecting it straight out the side and toward the back, right? So you're firing the round and you have that recoil pressure pushing back into your shoulder, and when that pressure gets here, it hits these fins and actually starts pulling the other way, right? So it's countering the effect of the recoil by pulling back the other way. Now, this particular muzzle brake compensator, this is an SJC Titan titanium muzzle brake. This is mounted to a 4570. This is my Henry X 4570, and this is a very unique sort of compensator, right? The other one I have on, and I'll talk about why. The other one I have here, this is a Ranger Point Precision muzzle brake, and this is hooked on, mounted to my Rossi R92 triple black. Right? They're both really great guns, by the way. Do you really need a muzzle brake on a 44 Magnum? Well, I would say probably not, but because I had a threaded barrel, and because this particular muzzle brake from Ranger Point, it's very, very inexpensive. So for the price of this, I thought, you know, why not? And you just thread it on, and you're running, up and running. So probably not as effective on here, but anything you can do to smooth out that, you know, rifle moving, the barrel moving up or down or any direction, it's going to increase the accuracy of your shot, so it doesn't hurt, right? Now it's really, really effective on a 4570. This 4570 produces a ton of energy, so yes, very effective. Now I'm going to stop real quick here, and I'm going to demo how much energy is produced by this particular brake. It's really incredible, and I have a really good demonstration of that. Some of you might not think so, but let's have a look at this demonstration of the energy that is coming out the side of this particular muzzle brake. Have a look at this. Okay, that's crazy, isn't it? I mean, you got to be aware of that, right? It makes a big difference. Now, when I was watching another video on this particular muzzle brake on this gun, the shooter had shot the rifle without the brake on here, and then he put the brake on and shot, and his first comment was, "The gun's louder," right? Well, the gun isn't actually louder. What's happening is, instead of that sound traveling out away from you, heading down range, when all that energy is dispersed out the sides, it's also taken the sound energy with it. And so to his ears, it sounded like the gun was louder. That was his first comment. And what that tells me is that this thing's actually doing something, right? There's some effect there that particular shooter felt. So this one, I can tell you for firsthand that it makes a big difference. Now, with this one, let's have a look at it. This again, the Titan, and by SJC, and you'll notice underneath it's solid, right? And the reason why it's solid is because you don't want those gases going down, because that would push the barrel up. Right up here on top, you got a couple of ports, And those ports compensate for the rise of the barrel, so they counter that force and push down, where the brake action or the counter resistance to your recoil happens here on the side, right? So that's pulling this way, right? So that's what the brake's actually doing. And again, this particular brake on this gun, very effective, and with a 45-70, highly worth it. Now, just going through, talking about this a little bit, there's a term that kind of bothers me a little bit, and that's the term timing or timed. This is considered a timed muzzle brake, and this is considered an untimed muzzle brake. Now that's a term I guess they use in the civilian world, I don't know. In the military, I heard the term time or timing, and it had to do with a 50 caliber machine gun and the headspace and timing on that particular weapon. It had to do with the bolt and the position of the bolt and the firing pin, right? So completely different. The only way you're gonna, change or alter any kind of timing is at this point where the gas and that energy leaves the barrel. So if for some crazy reason you were to thread this, put a bunch of big spacers in here and move this down the barrel, then it's gonna change the timing of when the muzzle brake actually does its job. Right now, I don't know why you'd ever do that. It wouldn't even be safe to do. So timing, as far as I'm concerned, has no bearing on this thing whatsoever. What's important is the orientation, right? The orientation is critical. So when you thread this on your barrel, you have to have these ports on the top facing up and the ports on the side facing sideways. If you twisted this around and those ports were off to this, direction, left or right or down, it's going to push your barrel in that direction. So why would you do that, right? So the important thing about the brake is the orientation of the brake, and that's achieved by adding a couple of small washers. Now, you can argue that that will push the muzzle brake, further forward and alter the timing, right? That's probably where the argument comes in. That's such a small distance, it's not going to have any bearing on the timing whatsoever as far as I'm concerned. But it's important to put the right number of spacers in here so that when you thread this on and you tighten it to the right tightness, that you get the right alignment. So it's all about the alignment and the orientation, nothing to do with timing. Now this brake, they refer to it as an untimed brake, and the reason for that is there's no spacers here, and there's no orientation required because there's an equal number of holes or ports all the way around. So there is no need to get a correct alignment on this brake. So it's what again is called untimed. Doesn't make any sense to me. You just screw it on and go, and the forces come out equally. When that force hits it, they're dispersed equally, and that will reduce the flash like a flash suppressor would, and it also has that little bit of backwards force pulling the rifle back out of your shoulder, right? So that's it. That's how it works. Again, you saw a demonstration of how effective that is. Now there's one more thing just to mention quickly. There's talk, once in a while you'll hear something about muzzle strike, right? And muzzle strike is basically a round coming down the barrel and hitting the muzzle device, right? Because when it leaves here, you're no longer in lands and grooves. You're basically in the space of this thing. But if you buy the correct brake for your application and you install it correctly, I don't think you'll ever have to worry about a muzzle strike. I've never had one, never seen one. Probably could never happen unless you did something really wrong and you skewed this thing one way or another, or it was manufactured incorrectly. That's the only way I can see it ever get a muzzle strike. All right, so I don't even worry about that. But they do need to be put on as the manufacturer suggests, put on correctly, and they should be, trouble-free, other than just having to clean them, right? So really, that's how a muzzle brake works. Now, why do I run a muzzle brake or a compensator and not a silencer? Well, a silencer, the way the silencer works kind of uses the same principle of using that energy. It's a big can, and the can, if you look inside of it, has a bunch of perforations in it, or holes. And when all that energy travels down your barrel and hits that silencer, that energy disperses through those perforations or holes into the can, and that can absorbs that sound energy, right? Rather than it just coming out of the end of the barrel. So that's how a silencer works. I don't have a need for one. I'd rather have a smooth action, limit the movement of the barrel, and have a more accurate, stable shot. And that's why I care to have a muzzle brake, especially on this guy, especially on the 4570. I think it's very, very useful. But anyway, that's how the silencer works. Not a big, need for them. Now, if your silencer, if you use it a lot and that energy's hitting those that sound deadening material, depending on how that material is made, it could wear out over time and become less and less effective. Probably have to have a lot of rounds go through that silencer for that to happen, but that could be something to consider with the silencer. Anyway, that's how the muzzle brake works, and that's why I have them on these particular rifles. I like them. They seem to work really good, at least on the 4570. I love the way my Rossi shoots. Super nice, super smooth, really easy to put that on. There's no spacers or anything. You just screw it on, tighten it down, and off you go. So that one's super easy. Very very cost effective. Doesn't cost a lot of money, so it's kind of a no-brainer, right? You could put a silencer on there if you so desire as well. Just make sure you get the right threads and the right silencer for your gun, or the right muzzle device for your gun. That's the critical point. Now, hey, notice something on that Rossi? Yeah, we're going to talk about that later. That is a GoPro developed device, developed with the help of a friend of mine at work, and we're going to talk about that in another video, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, hope you guys are out in your garage doing stuff and enjoying a cup of coffee, and I hope that was helpful. You have any questions, just let me know. I'm happy to help, and good shooting out there, guys. See you. Bye.